Taken from a book known as the Kolbrin. This is ancient accounts of the destroyer taken from Egyptian scrolls. It tells of the God of their slaves, Israelites, bringing death and destruction to them. Chapter 3. The Destroyer, Part 1, from the Great Scroll. Men forget the days of the destroyer. Only the wise know where it went, and that it will return in its appointed hour. It raged across the heavens in the days of wrath, and this was its likeness. It was as a billowing cloud of smoke, and wrapped in a ruddy glow, not distinguishable in joint or limb. Its mouth was an abyss, from which came flame, smoke, and hot cinders. When ages pass, certain laws operate upon the stars in the heavens. Their ways change. There is movement and restlessness. They are no longer constant, and a great light appears redly in the skies. When blood drops upon the earth, the destroyer will appear, and mountains will open up and belch forth fire and ashes. Trees will be destroyed, and all living things engulfed. Waters will be swallowed up by the land, and seas will boil. The heavens will burn brightly and redly. There will be a copper hue over all the face of the land, followed by a day of darkness. A new moon will appear and break up and fall. The people will scatter in madness. They will hear the trumpet and battle cry of the destroyer, and will seek refuge in the den in the earth. Terror will eat away their hearts, and their courage will flow from them like water from a broken pitcher. They will be eaten up in the flames of wrath, and consumed by the breath of the destroyer. Thus, in the days of heavenly wrath which have gone, and thus it will be in the days of doom when it comes again. The time of its coming and going are known unto the wise. These are the signs and times which shall precede the destroyer's return. 110 generations shall pass into the west, and nations will rise and fall. Men will fly in their air birds, and swim in the seas as fishes. Men will talk peace with one another. Hypocrisy and deceit shall have their day. Women will be as men, and men as women. Passions will be a plaything of man. A nation of soothsayers shall rise and fall, and their tongue shall be the speech of the learned. A nation of lawgivers shall rule the earth, and pass away into nothingness. One worship will pass into the four quarters of the earth, talking peace and bringing war. A nation of seas will be greater than any other, but will be as an apple rotten at the core and will not endure. A nation of traders will destroy men with wonders, and it shall have its day. Then shall the high strive with the low, the north with the south, the east with the west, and the light with the darkness. Men shall be divided by their races, and the children will be born as strangers among them. Brother shall strive with brother, and husband with wife. Fathers will no longer instruct their sons, and their sons will be wayward. Women will become the common property of men, and will no longer be held in regard and respect. O sentinels of the universe who watch for the destroyer, how long will your coming vigil last? O mortal men who wait without understanding, where will you hide yourselves in the dead days of doom? When the heavens shall be torn apart, and the skies rent in twain, in the days when children will turn gray-headed? This is the thing which will be seen. This is the terror your eyes will behold. This is the form of destruction that will rush upon you. There will be the great body of fire, the glowing head with many mouths and eyes ever changing. Terrible teeth will be seen in the formless mouths, and fearful dark belly will glow redly from fires inside. Even the most stout-hearted man will tremble, and his bowels will be loosened. O sentinels of the universe who watch for the destroyer, How long will your coming vigil last? O mortal men who wait without understanding, where will you hide yourselves in the dread days of doom, when the heavens shall be torn apart, and the skies rent in twain, in the days when children will turn gray-headed? This is the thing which will be seen. This is the terror your eyes will behold. This is the form of destruction that will rush upon you. There will be the great body of fire, the glowing head with many mouths, and eyes ever changing. Terrible teeth will be seen in the formless mouths, and a fearful dark belly will glow redly from fires inside. Even the most stout-hearted man will tremble, and his bowels will be loosened. For this is not a thing understandable to men. It will be a vast sky-spanning form enwrapping the earth, burning with many hues within wide open mouths. These will descend to sweep across the face of the land, engulfing all in the yawning jaws. The greatest warriors will charge against it in vain. The fangs will fall out, and lo, they are terror-inspiring things of cold, hardened water. Great boulders will be hurled down upon men, crushing them into red powder. As the great salt waters rise up in its train and roaring pour towards the land, even the heroes among mortal men will be overcome with madness. As moths fly swiftly to their doom in the burning flame, so will these men rush to their own destruction. The flames going before will devour all the works of men. The waters following will sweep away whatever remains. The dew of death will fall softly, as grey carpet over the cleared land. Men will cry out in their madness, "Oh, whatever being there is, save us from this tall form of terror, save us from the grey dew of death." Chapter 5 The Destroyer, Part 3, from the Scroll of Adefa. The doom shape called the Destroyer in Egypt was seen in all the lands whereabouts. In color it was bright and fiery, in appearance changing and unstable. It twisted about itself like a coil, like water bubbling into a pool from an underground supply, and all men agree it was a most fearsome sight. It was not a great comet or a lucent star, being more like a fiery body of flame. Its movements on high were slow, below it swirled in the manner of smoke, and it remained close to the sun whose face it hid. There was a bloody redness about it which changed as it passed along its course. It caused death and destruction in its rising and setting. It swept the earth with grey cinder rain and caused many plagues, hunger and other evils. It bit the skin of men and beasts until they became mottled with sores. The earth was troubled and shook, the hills and mountains moved and rocked. The dark smoke-filled heavens bowed over the earth, and a great howl came to the ears of men, borne to them upon the wings of the wind. It was the cry of the dark Lord, the Master of Dread. Thick clouds of fiery smoke passed before him, and there was an awful hail of hot stones and coals of fire. The doom shape thundered sharply in the heavens and shot out bright lightnings. The channels of water were turned back onto themselves when the land tilted, and great trees were tossed about and snapped like twigs. Then a voice like 10,000 trumpets was heard over the wilderness, and before its burning breath the flames parted. The whole of the land moved and mountains melted. The sky itself roared like 10,000 lions in agony, and bright arrows of blood sped back and forth across its face. Earth swelled up like bread upon the hearth. This was the aspect of the doom-shaped called the Destroyer when it appeared in days long gone by, in olden times. It is thus described in the old records, few of which remain. It is said that when it appears in the heavens above, earth splits open from the heat like a nut roasted before the fire. Then flames shoot up through the surface and leap about like fiery fiends upon the black blood. The moisture inside the land is all dried up. The pastures and cultivated places are consumed in flames, and they and all the trees become white ashes. The dune shape is like a circling ball of flame which scatters small fiery offspring in its train. It covers about a fifth of the sky and sends writhing snake-like fingers down to earth. Before it, the sky appears frightened, and it breaks up and scatters away. Midday is no brighter than night. It spawns a host of terrible things. These are things said of the destroyer in the old records. Read them with a solemn heart, knowing that the doomed shape has its appointed time and will return. Chapter 6. The Dark Days. The dark days began with the last visitation of the destroyer, and they were foretold by strange omens in the skies. All men were silent, and went about with pale faces. The leaders of the slaves, which had built a city to the glory of Thom, stirred up unrest, and no man raised his arm against them. They foretold great events of which people were ignorant, and of which the temple seers were not informed. These were days of ominous calm, when people waited for they knew not what. The presence of an unseen doom was felt. The hearts of men were stricken. Laughter was heard no more, and grief and wailing sounded throughout the land. Even the voices of children were stilled, and they did not play together, but stood silent. The slaves became bold and insolent, and women were the possession of any man. Fear walked the land, and women became barren with terror. They could not conceive, and those with child aborted. All men closed up within themselves. The days of stillness were followed by a time when the noise of trumpetings, shrillings was heard in the heavens, and the people became as frightened beasts without a herdsman, as asses when lions prowl without their fold. The people spoke of the God of the slaves, and the reckless men said, "If we knew where this God were to be found, we would sacrifice to him." But the God of the slaves was not found among them. He was not to be found among the swamplands or in the brick pits. His manifestation was in the heavens for all men to see. But they did not see with understanding. Nor would any God listen, for all were dumb because of the hypocrisy of men. The dead, no longer sacred, were thrown into the waters. Those already entombed were neglected and many exposed. They lay unprotected against the hands of thieves. He who once toiled long in the sun, bearing the yoke himself, now possessed oxen. He who grew no grain now owned a storehouse full. He who once dwelt at ease among his children now thirsted for water. He who once sat in the sun with crumbs and dregs was now bloated with food. He reclined in the shade, his bowels overflowing. Cattle were left unattended to roam into strange pastures, and men ignored their marks and slew the beasts of their neighbors. No man owned anything. The public record were cast forth and destroyed, and no man knew who were slaves and who were masters. The people cried out to Pharaoh in their distress, but he stopped his ears and acted like a deaf man. There were those who spoke falsely before Pharaoh, and had gods hostile toward the land. Therefore the people cried out for their blood to appease it. But it was not these strange priests who put strife in the land instead of peace, for one was even of the household of Pharaoh, and walked among the people unhampered. Dust and smoke clouds darkened the sky and colored the waters upon which they fell with a bloody hue. Plague was throughout the land. The river was bloody and blood was everywhere. The water was vile, and men's stomachs shrank from drinking. Those who did drink from the river vomited it up, for it was polluted. The dust tore wounds in the skin of man and beast. In the glow of the destroyer the earth was filled with redness. Vermin bred and filled the air and face of the earth with loathsomeness. Wild beasts, afflicted with torments under the lashing sand and ashes, came out from their lairs in the wastelands and cave places and stalked the abodes of men. All the tame beasts whimpered, and the land was filled with cries of sheep and moans of cattle. Trees throughout the land were destroyed, and no herb or fruit was to be found. The face of the land was battered and devastated by a hail of stones, which smashed down all that stood in its path of the torrent. They swept down in hot showers, and strange flowing fire ran along the ground in their wake. The fish of the river died in the polluted waters. Worms, insects, and reptiles sprang from the earth in huge numbers. Great gusts of wind brought swarms of locusts which covered the sky. As the destroyer flung itself through the heavens, it blew great gusts of cinders across the face of the land. The gloom of a long night spread a dark mantle of blackness which extinguished every ray of light. None knew when it was day and when it was night, for the sun cast no shadow. The darkness was not the clean darkness of night, but a thick darkness, in which the breath of men was stopped in their throats. Men gasped in a hot cloud of vapor which enveloped all the land, and snuffed out all the lamps and fires. Men were benumbed, and lay moaning in their beds. None spoke to another or took food, for they were overwhelmed with despair. Ships were sucked away from the moorings and destroyed in the great whirlpools. It was a time of undoing. The earth was turned over as clay spun upon a potter's wheel. The whole land was filled with uproar from the thunder of the destroyer overhead and the cry of the people. There, as the sound of moaning and lamentation on every side, the earth spewed up its dead. Corpses were cast up out of their resting places, and the embalmed were revealed to the sight of men. Pregnant women miscarried, and the seed of men was stopped. The craftsman left his tasks undone, the potter abandoned his wheel, and the carpenter his tools, and they departed to dwell in the marshes. All crafts were neglected, and the slaves lured the craftsmen away. The dues of Pharaoh could not be collected, for there was neither wheat nor barley, goose nor fish. The rights of Pharaoh could not be enforced, for the fields of grain and the pastures were destroyed. The highborn and the lowly prayed together that life might come to an end, and that the turmoil and thundering cease to beat upon their ears. Terror was the companion of men by day, and horror their companion by night. Men lost their senses and became mad. They were distracted by frightfulness. On the great night of the destroyer's wrath, when its terror was at its height, there was a hail of rocks, and the earth heaved as pain rent her bowels. Gates, columns, and walls were consumed by fire, and the statues of gods were overthrown and broken. People fled outside their dwellings in fear and were slain by the hail. Those who took shelter from the hail were swallowed when the earth split open. The habitations of men collapsed on those inside, and there was panic on every hand. But the slaves who lived in huts in the reedlands at the place of pits were spared. The land burnt like tinder. A man watched upon his rooftops, and the heavens hurled wrath upon him, and he died. The land writhed under the wrath of the destroyer, and groaned with the agony of Egypt. It shook itself, and the temple palaces of the nobles were thrown down from their foundations. The high-born ones perished in the midst of the ruins, and all the strength of the land was stricken. Even the great one, the firstborn of Pharaoh, died with the highborn in the midst of terror and the falling stones. The children of princesses were cast out into the streets, and those who were not cast out died within their abodes. There were 9 days of darkness and upheaval, while a tempest raged, such as never had been known before. When it passed away, brother buried brother throughout the land. Men rose up against those in authority, and fled from the cities to dwell in tents in the outlands. Egypt lacked great men to deal with the times. The people were weak from fear, and bestowed gold, silver, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and copper upon the slaves, and their priests they gave chalices, urns, and ornaments. Pharaoh alone remained calm and strong in the midst of confusion. The people turned to wickedness in their weakness and despair. Harlots